100 million US and December 31st. That's the ultimatum bondholders just gave Jamaica's most famous billionaire. Michael Leachin could lose control of the company in the coming weeks.
I think the gravitas of the situation is immense. When you think of banking in Jamaica, you think NCB. So this is massive. His private holding company, they're struggling to meet their own bond obligation. They owed about 300 million US to Jamaica and Trinidadian note holders. Roughly about 50% of NCB's shares were pledged as collateral. As the debt came due, things started to pop up and cracks started to show. Portland missed at US, I think it was about $23 million payment.
100 million US and December 31st. That's the ultimatum bondholders just gave Jamaica's most famous billionaire. So hi guys, my name is Matthew Preston and welcome to the Limitless podcast. Joining us as always is your co-host, Dr. Thaon Simms. Hail out the people, Thaon.
Hey guys, what's good?
Yeah, and today we will be talking about NCB Financial Group, one of Jamaica's largest banks, posting record profits, but its chairman, Michael Leachin, could lose control of the company in the coming weeks. In this episode, we're going to try to break down exactly what's going on, why the stock has dropped so much, and what it means for the thousands and thousands of shareholders of NCB watching this unfold. And yeah, let's get into it. How do you feel about this one, Thaon?
I think the gravitas of the situation is immense. I think that, as you said, the thousands of shareholders that are possibly watching our content or not. We could be ambitious and say thousands of them are watching us. Unlikely, but who knows? Because it's such a massively held stock. I mean, when you look at it, NCB is either the biggest bank in Jamaica or one of the biggest banks in Jamaica. So, when you think of banking in Jamaica, you think NCB. So this is massive. And
are you an NCB customer?
I have a bank account, with NCB. I actually have a loan with NCB, a car loan. Yeah. So I've never really, outside of sending money to their account, I've never really used the account. I thought their online banking was just a bit more difficult than my current account, which is Social. So I just don't really use them. But I know a lot of people that use NCB. So my parents, I think, have NCB account. Yeah, both of them have NCB accounts. So it's massive, because I think a lot of people have interacted with NCB in some way, shape, or form. And then the ripple effect for the whole stock market. We have a lot to discuss, man. So I'm excited about this episode.
Yeah. I think what would be good to do would be to give, a backstory on NCB. So we already mentioned, I guess when I looked at it, right, the company was one of the best performing stocks a couple of years back. I think it was 2019 or so. It's hit over 200 Jamaican dollars, right? And yeah, that means the company was, I don't know how much billions or something the company was worth then. It was seen as, the oldest stock. I'm sure at the time people were saying, oh, it could even go higher and it could be $500, $300 and whatever. Right?
You remember they wanted to list on the I think the New York Stock Exchange at one point.
Oh yeah, I remember hearing something about that. Yeah. That would have been interesting, because you think, I guess looking back now, if that were to have happened, that would it's interesting to see what that would have had, because I feel like it would have been better for Michael.
Might have been.
Yeah, you don't think so?
No, it might have been better. It might have been a bit more difficult at the time to list, especially with the debt that they were accumulating has been accumulating from then. So, it's, who knows? It could have been better. It could have possibly been better. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah, but I think, so we said company was doing really well then. It was one of the favorite stocks. It was something that tons of people were saying prior to putting your portfolio and stuff. That was actually right before, I guess, I had started investing, or right at the beginning. Would have been, it had peaked, I think, around the time maybe that I had started. Or it had peaked and then I started maybe a few months later or so. And yeah, I guess over the, when COVID hit the world, it hit sent a shock to a lot of different companies or countries, especially a country like Jamaica, we depend heavily on tourism. The borders were locked down. But yeah, they lent money to a lot of these businesses and stuff. It affected their business, and not just them, a lot of other country or companies And I think they had like start paying dividends and stuff. They're instructed from the Bank of Jamaica. And yeah, basically what can happen is that you can use your ownership in NCB, which is, I guess, what the companies affiliated with Michael Leachin did. They said, hey, we have this asset which is worth, I don't know, whatever billion US or whatever, millions, hundreds of millions of US at a time. We will let us borrow. We want to invest in other things, right? So we would like to borrow some money from you. And to, I guess, lower the risk, you could say, hey, lend us the money because we will sign a document to say if we are unable to pay you, you could technically own these shares and you could seize the shares and then you could sell them to someone else. You could get the dividends from the shares, cash from it, whatever. And so that's what happened. They borrowed money many years ago. And then basically over the last several years, they've been running into.
Who is they? Because I think of it as
those companies, I guess.
Yeah, I think of it as it's two different problems, or I would say it's the owners of it is two different problems. So I think of NCB, like, NCBFG, NCB Financial Group, the holding company. It's listed on the Jamaica Stock Exchange, etc. And then I think of Michael Leachin affiliated companies,
which he owns shares in.
Yeah, so and those are like what? Portland, Barbados Limited. You have AIC, Barbados as well, and then Specialty Coffee Investment Company. So it's really those three major companies, and they own shares in NCB. And so I think of the Michael Leachin affiliated companies owning shares in NCB and having debt issues, and then I think of NCB Financial Group owning shares in like Guardian and them having debt issues. And then there are two different scenarios, because our last episode on NCB, we spoke mainly about NCB and the debt issues and them pledging Guardian shares. And what that means is, they own Guardian shares. NCBFG owns Guardian shares. And
that'd be Guardian Insurance. Well, Guardian, not just Jamaica, but Guardian Insurance. They're one of the big insurance companies in the Caribbean.
In the entire Caribbean, yeah. I think it's Guardian Holdings Limited is the proper word, the proper company name. But at that time,
they manage a lot of pensions in Jamaica too.
Yeah. They actually manage quite a bit of pensions. I think they bought NCB's pension arm. There's a pension arm that they bought too. But so at the time, NCB actually they owed people money, right? And so they had to figure out how to pay them. So they refinanced about a lot of, I think it was like $250 million US of debt back then. I think this was like last year. And they pledged, meaning they used their stake in Guardian as collateral at the time. And that, there was like a lot of market jitters and reputational damage because they used Guardian shares, which is kind of unusual for a major Caribbean bank to, you want to use your crown jewel, because Guardian actually.
But I think the shares were already used.
Part of the shares, not all the shares, but now I think they pledged a significant portion, or I think all of the shares now are pledged. So it was a bit weird at the time because of that. And there's a point in time where the shares are like double pledged. So it's like you pledge them in the previous bond, and then you go back again and you pledge them in the new bond, but you have to pay off that previous bond first. So it's like they're double pledged. But that was cleared up and so on. But that was then. So now the major issue I think that people are seeing in the news, and I'm seeing in Trinidad news articles and stuff like that, is the Michael Leachin affiliated companies and them being almost like in distress. So around the same time, his private holding company is the same one that we were mentioning, Portland and AIC and the coffee one, Specialty Coffee. They're struggling to meet their own bond obligations. So they actually owed around 300 million to like Jamaica and Trinidadian. Yeah, 300 million US. Thank you for that clarification, bro. And they owed collectively they owed about that much, 300 million US to Jamaica and Trinidadian note holders. And that's debt. But that debt now is backed by Leachin's holdings of NCBFG shares. And that's the crucial part. And so, I think earlier this year, Leachin owned about like half of NCB. I think it's more than half. It's a bit more than half of NCBFG. but roughly about 50% of NCB's shares were pledged as collateral for loans and these bonds taken out by these companies, the three companies. And so, as the debt came due, things started to pop up and cracks started to show. And so you could see that they've been missing payments.
I think a good way to understand it would be like, okay, just like if you go to the bank and you want to borrow money to buy a car, the bank usually can seize the car. From my understanding is that the bank could seize the car if you have issues paying the loan. So that's one of the reasons why they're willing to lend you, like if you think about it, or the same thing with a house, a mortgage. A house is seen as one of the safest investments. So that's why the banks are willing to lend you millions of dollars sometimes to buy a house. Versus if you say, I want to start a business, you're not usually going to get as much money, or if they would lend you the money, it would be at a very high interest rate or something. So it's the same thing where it's like you have this thing. So this would be the Michael Leach and affiliated companies that you mentioned, those three companies. So you have those companies, they own this thing, which was the NCB. They borrow the money and they're saying, hey, if you can't pay us, or if we can't pay you, you can always take this thing because it's worth so much. And I guess at the time it was like, hey, this is something that will never go down. It's going to continue to increase in value. It's paying out all of these dividends. It's like you're getting all this money from it. So, I think that was the thing I guess it's now like if someone comes into looking, they'll be like, oh, wait, but why? That'd be so risky, Why would you be willing to do that? But I guess you have to realize that, at the time, that's not really how people viewed it. It's just how it's played out now. You're going to look back and say, oh, that was so obvious. I would have never invested in that. How could people invest in something like that where it's done that? But at the time, it was not seen that way.
Yeah.
So I always try to put yourself in that perspective. Don't just say, oh, like those people are so stupid. How could they do that?
Yeah. It's a bit nuanced, and the thing now that's happening is imagine now you miss the payments to the bank, right? You're missing payments that you miss your monthly car payment or your monthly mortgage and so on. And the same thing has happened, with even some of Leachin's companies. Portland missed at US, I think it was about $23 million payment